So thank you everyone for coming to today's event. So this event is brought to you by Data Talks Club, which is a community of people who are interested in data. We have weekly events, and some of the events which we have usually on Tuesday, they are more technical, they are with presentation. This week we talked about AWS Glue Data Brew, a new service from AWS. But then we'll take a couple of weeks, a break for a couple of weeks. And then for the next months, we will talk about, in the next month, we will talk about model monitoring and then a feature store called Feast. We also have live podcast events on Friday, like today. This is more like a discussion. We don't have slides, it's just Q&A. And today the topic is mentoring. And for this type of event, we will also have a break. And then we will come back in the middle of January with a topic on writing. Then we will talk about developer advocate role. And we will talk about machine learning ops, a new role. If during today you have any questions, please ask on Slido. So Slido, this is a special platform for asking questions. I will now share the link with you in chat, so you can just click on it. And I think we can start. So just let me pull my notes. So today the topic we have is mentoring, and we have a special guest today, Rahul Jain. Rahul is a technical leader with 20 years of experience in building and running software products. Now he leads business intelligence and data engineering units at Omeo, which is a ticket booking company. Also, Rahul is a mentor at the Mentoring Club, where he offers guidance and coaching to engineers and managers. And this is the reason I reached out to Rahul and asked to share his experience with us. Because of his experience at the Mentoring Club. Thank you, Rahul, for coming today, and it's a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Alexei, for having me.
Yes, so before we go into the main topic of mentoring, maybe you could tell us a bit about your background. Can you tell us about your journey so far?
Yeah, sure. So, I grew up in India, in different parts of northern India. And then I graduated in 99 in mining engineering, actually. So not data mining, but mining engineering. But I think by the time I graduated, I was kind of not so interested in pursuing a career in mining. And I was more, I was sort of interested in computers, around that time. And thankfully for me, there was this IT boom in the world. So I kind of took the advantage and joined an Indian IT services company in Bangalore, in India. And I was there for about 7 years as a Java programmer. And I think back then Java was almost like how you have Golang and Rust these days. It was like the cool thing to do. So I learned a lot, worked on in different domains as a consulting company, mostly in finance, but also other domains. And then after spending about 7 years there, I moved to Singapore and joined Credit Suisse, which is an investment bank. And I think that was probably my first foray into the data world because as an investment bank, there was most of the products and technologies that they were working on were all related to data, even though we didn't really call it big data at that time. But I was still, I was part of this team called Market Data Ingest, where I was kind of doing ETLs, although I didn't know that it was called an ETL at that time. And so I spent again about 6 or 7 years there, working initially as a backend engineer, and then later as a team lead as well. And then I joined ThoughtWorks, which is a consulting company. They have offices all over the world, and I think they're very popular for deep engineering skills. And Martin Fowler, if you're familiar with his name, he's one of the employees. And there again, it's a consulting company, so I worked on different domains. But again, I was kind of very close to data around that time. And then about 3 years ago, I decided to move to Berlin to join Omeo, which was called Go Euro at that time. As I said, we are a ticketing company. So if you are traveling anywhere in Europe and also in US these days, you can go to our portal and book your tickets. And then when I joined, I was asked to lead the BI and data engineering team, and that has been somewhat my journey so far. Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting experience, especially starting from mining.
Oh
And
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's kind of crazy because I started with mining and I'm kind of doing data mining now. So it's, there's some similarity in those two worlds.
yeah, even though now it's not called data mining anymore, now it's data science, right? And you also you like today the topic is mentoring, and you
Mhm.
are also active in this area. You mentor people
Mhm.
at this mentoring club. And what does mentoring mean to you? Like, what is it? What is this activity?
Yeah, so I think the traditional definition of mentoring is about having, I think they call it a partnering relationship with someone who maybe knows a little bit more about a certain topic than you, and so you reach out to them and build this kind of support relationship. Maybe there's some questions that you're trying to answer and so on. But for me, I define it a little more loosely, um, and and for me the definition is just about reaching out to someone for a different perspective. It could be about a problem that you're trying to solve, some challenge or some decision that you're trying to make in your career, and it's just about getting an opinion from someone who may have a perspective that might be interesting for you. I think it would be that's where I would kind of say that that's how I define it. And I feel that in our industry, especially in tech, it's very important because personally, I've seen that unlike industries like food or retail or law, we don't really have a very good tradition of apprenticeship, where you're for the first few years you're working with someone closely, they're mentoring you, guiding you, and that's why it becomes very important to have someone to reach out to when you have some challenges that you're trying to navigate through.
So, as I understood, for you, it doesn't necessarily mean like a long-term activity. It can also be just reaching out for advice, but also can be like something more, how to say, like more formal, like an apprenticeship program at a company which lasts for maybe a couple of years, right?
Yeah, it depends. So it depends on your needs. I think traditionally, and I also recommend to have a long-term mentoring relationship. But quite often people have like really small, very specific questions, and it's perfectly okay to reach out and to a mentor and get some advice in that area as well. So it's not like a very specific definition. It just depends on your needs. Yeah,
So it can be, let's say, I am a Java developer and I want to go to data analysis, and then I
absolutely,
reach out to somebody asking, "Hey, do you think this is the right thing to me?" Uh, this would be also mentoring.
absolutely.
And was mentoring an important part of your career so far?
Um, well, for the first 10 years, no. And that's the crazy thing. And in fact, that's probably why I got into mentoring because I realized this huge gap that I went through. So for the first 10 years, I didn't have a mentor really. I didn't even know what that meant. But my foray into mentoring, both as a mentor and as a mentee, started when I joined ThoughtWorks because ThoughtWorks had a very rich culture of having a sponsor or a mentor for every employee, and that's how I kind of got introduced to this concept, and that's when I started having mentors as well as mentees.
Okay. And how does it work? So basically, the moment you join, you get a mentor who stays with you throughout your entire employment at
Yes,
ThoughtWorks, or?
yes. So I mean, they keep experimenting with different formats, but I think yeah, that's typically how it works. You're not always appointed a mentor. You're encouraged to find one for yourself. But if you can't, then the organization or the people team or someone can help you find one for yourself. And it's typically not someone who's from your team. because the idea is to get mentorship from a person who can offer like an unbiased, impartial opinion about your career, and therefore it's advisable to seek someone who's not your immediate manager, for example, someone from a different team, or something like that. Yeah.
Mhm. And if you want to find a mentor, let's say at
Mhm.
ThoughtWorks, it's nice that there is such a thing as a mentorship program, right? But having such person to talk to and talk about your problems is very useful, especially uh, there are there are some things you don't want to talk to your manager about, right? So
Exactly.
sometimes it's better to ask for an opinion for somebody else, like you said, from a
Yeah.
different team. How how to find such a person? Do you have any ideas?
I think that's probably the most difficult part of it all, right? Because um, you don't know whether the person. So first of all, you're trying to seek someone who has experience or who can offer meaningful, actionable advice in the area that you're struggling with or you have questions around. Um, and secondly, you're also looking for someone who can play that role. Just because they have the knowledge does not mean they can also be a good mentor. But I think it's an iterative process. So rather than trying to kind of spend a lot of time initially searching for the right person, you maybe have to try it out, with few people. So you could ask around in your network. If similar to ThoughtWorks, if you have a formal program in your organization, you could hook into that. Or otherwise, through your personal network, you typically come across somebody. But I've also seen people, and these days we have programs like the mentoring club that I'm a member of, which have made it a lot more easier to find someone. But otherwise, I've even seen people just directly through LinkedIn reaching out to somebody they know or they've heard of, and asking them, hey, I have these questions, would you have some time to give to me? So yeah. But I think, as I said, it's a process, so you have to go through a couple of iterations before you can find the right person.
Yeah, and that's interesting. You said you suggested that you can just reach out to your network, and sometimes I'm active on LinkedIn, and sometimes I have these requests, like, "Hey, can you help me on this thing?" Um, and yeah, I cannot always help. Like, I don't always have the expertise, and sometimes I feel like people just send it to everyone,
Mhm.
and in hope that somebody will respond. But I think maybe there is a better way to target this message to a specific person, right? So maybe you have some recommendation. Let's say, if you want to find a mentor in your network, how do you go about finding this person?
I think it's like building a relationship, right? So yes, the cold calls would be unpredictable. You don't know whether the other person has time. They don't know who you are, and sometimes just investing in those networks a little bit before you reach out to them is always better. So maybe there's a meetup group, or like the Data Talk Slack channel or something. So you're building some kind of, you're investing in that relationship or that network a little bit. The other person also gets to know you a little bit more, and that's the time that you reach out to them and ask if they are willing to. And if they know you already, if they've seen how you work, if they've seen you participate, then they may be a little more open to that kind of conversation, right? So I think, yeah, I think one of the ways to do that is to just build that relationship. But again, I would also say don't be afraid of, like, if you really have a good reason to reach out to somebody, maybe just dropping them a line, an email, or a note with specifics would be helpful, and don't get deterred by a lack of an answer. You have to keep trying.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes. And yeah, so this is an interesting topic, like how to find a mentor. And you said sometimes, like what I call maybe uh, sending a cold email will still work. I do sometimes get such emails that are interesting. I'm happy to help people, but yeah, how this email should look like to increase the chances of response, um, in your opinion? Like, what are the emails? Let's say when you get an email, and you know that you immediately want um, to answer and to help this person versus okay, I don't know if I should spend my time trying to figure out what this person wants and if I want to help. Like, is there
Yeah.
something you can recommend?
No, absolutely. I think being a bit more specific in your request helps. So if I put myself in that situation and I get a message from someone and they say, "Hey, can you help me with this?" A little more detail around this is who I am, this is what I am struggling with, or this is the question I have. What do you think? This is what I have tried. So just showing that earnestness, that authenticity sometimes speaks volumes versus a very vague message saying, "Can you help me?" Because I don't know and I don't really know if I can really help you or not. So maybe just being more specific is helpful if you're purely making a cold call. And also maybe sharing a little bit about your background, that this is what I have done, this is how I'm navigating with this challenge right now, and so on and so forth. That might also be very helpful.
And like coming back a bit to your this experience as a mentee at ThoughtWorks, at some point, I guess you also became a mentor yourself, right?
Mhm.
So first you were a mentee, somebody was helping you, but you spent quite a while there. So at some point you had enough experience to actually mentor somebody. What did this do to your career? Like, how helpful was it? Was it helpful at all, or what were the benefits for you as a
Absolutely.
mentor?
There's quite a few benefits that I have seen in the last few years. I mean, first and foremost, just being able to kind of help someone out, or share your experiences is a reward in itself, because it's a way of giving it forward. I also felt that it made me. I'm still learning, but it made me into a better listener, because you kind of have to listen a lot and have to be good at listening. Um, I think it's also so as a team lead, I'm also leading a team. So in some sense, it also gives me a perspective about leading a team by myself, and what that means. And for example, if someone comes with a problem or challenge, then I can relate that with my own experiences in my team, and oh, am I also doing the same to my team? And so on and so forth. And then finally, it's also given me a good network now. So being part of this mentoring club, I'm also part of, I'm kind of networking with other people who are mentors themselves. So that's also a reward in a way.
Mhm. So basically, you can help others, and this is very rewarding. And you also get to know their problems and how to finding the solution to these problems is also helpful for you to
Absolutely.
basically, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you also
Um.
start seeing patterns in problems. I think that's another part of the learning, which is kind of a little subtle, but it happens over time. So what happens is that even though five people approach you with five different problems, but you start seeing that, oh, you know what, underneath it all, it's the imposter syndrome.
Mhm.
And then you start getting more sensitized to that as a kind of a more generic problem, and you start seeing those patterns in maybe the way you're leading your own team, or you're seeing someone else lead it, and that also adds to that learning.
And if somebody reaches out to you and asks for help on a topic where you don't have experience, what do you usually do in this case?
um, I think it's very simple. You just say that you don't know, you can't help in that area because you don't have much experience, and you then try and connect them to somebody who might be able to help. I think it's just about that.
Okay. Yeah. The, maybe have you been in a situation where you didn't know like how to solve a problem, but just by listening to somebody to listen by listening to their problem and then asking questions, you were able to help them.
Yeah, so that's something that I always try to do, right? So, and quite often it happens that someone would reach out to me from, I don't know, they have experience in marketing. They're not necessarily from the same like tech, but marketing. Or I had someone reach out to me from the construction industry. um, and initially, it felt like there isn't much of an overlap between my own experiences and theirs. So I wasn't sure how I would be able to help. But then, first and foremost, giving a listening ear to somebody itself is part of mentorship, because sometimes just by that they would be able to solve their own problems. And then secondly, as I said earlier, you can recognize common patterns. So even if they come from a different background, some of these social kind of problems that one sees in a workplace are very common. And that's when you can relate and say, hey, I don't know exactly how it works in your environment, but this is sounding similar to what I have seen, and here's what I have done when I had a challenge similar to yours. And that's how you try and start try and find these dots that can connect these two worlds together.
That's pretty interesting. So these people from construction industry or from like some other industries, they found you through this mentoring club.
Yes, yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe you can tell us a bit more about this club. What is this?
Yeah, so
What do you do there?
Love
Yes.
is an initiative that was started earlier this year by a few of my colleagues, ex-colleagues now, in Berlin. And I think the motivation was simple. We just wanted to reach out to people who had a need for some kind of career mentorship, mentoring or coaching. And so this is a club, call it a club, but it's a group of people who have grown to almost 300 people now, 300 mentors. And I don't have the exact numbers, but I think we've mentored or we've given close to 1,000 sessions, if not more. It's completely free of cost. So all you have to do is book a session with one of the mentors that's available on the club, and that's about it. And then it's just between you and the mentor. The mentors come from all different walks of life. A lot of the folks there are like CXOs in different companies around Europe, as well as outside. There's people from product, from tech, from marketing, sales, design, um, entrepreneurs. So there's lots of people from different walks of life.
Mhm. And which topics do you help with on this platform?
I personally help with things like career navigation. So it could be something like I said earlier, some challenges that you're facing at your workplace. There's some career related decisions that you're trying to make, maybe trying to switch a career, or you've just graduated and trying to figure out whether you should go for higher education or not. I also sometimes talk to people about more technical topics. So my background or my recent background is in data engineering. So there are times when people approach me about, what's your data stack or what should be an ideal stack for a startup and so on. So it varies between these. Yeah.
Yeah. And if somebody is looking for advice and somebody who wants to reach out to you through this mentoring club, what should they do to best prepare for this mentoring session? Like how to get the most out of this session?
So it kind of depends on what exactly are you looking for. I mean, initially. So, but let's take a common example, right? So let's say that you have some specific challenges that you're trying to navigate through. I think it helps to reach out to your mentor first, and give them as much details as possible about your background and what is it that you're looking for. But I think it also helps to do a bit of introspection to see what is it that you're trying to get out of the mentoring relationship or a session. Is it a one-off thing that you're trying to bounce some ideas? Are you looking for some validation about a decision that you've recently taken? Or are you looking for a more long-term engagement? So it's good to ask those kind of questions first. Um, I would say also that don't over prepare. It's not a job interview, because sometimes let the conversation flow. So book some time, get a basic idea, share these details with your mentor, and then let the conversation flow. One of the mistakes, not a mistake, but one of the misconceptions I've seen with people who come for mentoring sessions is that they expect a very kind of specific answer to a problem, and they're often disappointed maybe when they see that there's no real specific answers to most questions, right? A mentor's job is more about mm, showing you, giving you some pointers, or kind of planting a seed in your brain in a way, asking you to probe something deeper and so on. So it's a process, and just being aware of that before you get into the mentoring session itself, so that you know that you're not you're not disappointed by the end of it.
Mhm. And if you can share, if it's possible, maybe not something personal, but from one out from one of the recent sessions that you had, what kind of problem you were approached with? Like maybe there is something super
Yeah,
common that comes up.
absolutely. So there's a few common areas. Imposter syndrome is the
Hmm.
biggest. So most, I would say, more than 50-60% of the people who reach out to me are suffering from some kind of an imposter syndrome. They feel they're not good enough in whatever they're doing. That's very common. I also get a lot of questions about tech versus management, and this typically
Hmm.
happens with people who spend their initial 5 or 6 years in technology and are now either by themselves or by their organization being asked to take more leadership roles, and they feel, oh, is it a big choice that I have to make? Like if I do people management, I can't do tech, and vice versa. So this is very common. Then there's career moves. Should I join this company? Should I you know should I go for higher education, and those kind of questions as well.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. Like if somebody comes to you and says, uh, or describes a problem, and you understand, okay, this person has this imposter syndrome. What do
Mhm.
you usually recommend in this case?
So there's no one answer to it, because it depends. Because imposter syndrome can happen for various reasons. So the process that I usually have is to go a bit deeper into what's the root cause behind it, right? And more often than not, this is more of a perception or a myth that gets built up because of mostly external factors, but sometimes internal as well. So the process is just to scratch the surface, go a bit deeper, and question some of those beliefs, and then try and see what are the you know get to a place where you are able to define that more specifically. When you say, oh, I don't feel good enough, I don't feel I'm fit for working in this team, what does that mean? So I would say I can't give you a specific recommendation to your question, but I think it all depends on just going down that process and trying to understand the root cause behind the problem.
And that your answer makes me wonder. Like it seems like to be a good mentor, you really need to understand people, to go deep and find this root cause and understand. Okay, this is actually like the real problem is this imposter syndrome. Um, how do you learn that? Like as a tech person, because let's say we're usually like you as a Java developer previously. I was also a Java developer. We used to talking to computers, right? Writing code. How do we go from writing code to actually understanding people and being a good mentor? Or maybe it's not for everyone.
I think, well, I guess, yeah, I think you need to have a little bit of a natural inclination in helping people. But I would also argue that most people have that, right? And
Mhm.
as we grow, so yes, for the first couple of years of your career, maybe you're spending most of your energies as an individual contributor. But in most work environments, you're always helping someone out. Maybe there's a new person who joined your team and you're helping them with onboarding, right? So there's always that aspect of, it's even tech programming or data is still a social activity. You're still working in
Mhm.
teams, and therefore you do even inadvertently acquire a lot of these people skills, even if you don't believe that yourself. You do have always a personal way of helping other people, right? And it's just about honing that and bringing that to the table when you're acting as a mentor. And then there are certain aspects which you learn, kind of tricks of the trade, so to speak, which you learn as you go, like being a better listener, or not jumping, like one of my colleagues from the mentoring club calls it, the advice monster. So not immediately jumping into giving advice, but listening to what the other person is trying to say. So I think it's just about, as you said, it's a skill, it comes with practice. um, but I'm sure if you look deeper, you're already doing that in many ways in your current workplace already, right? So it's just about taking that to the next level.
So basically, do not be afraid of trying. It's not as difficult as it sounds, right?
No, not at all. And it's, it's a very rewarding exercise, I would say.
Hmm.
And there's nothing wrong in helping other people out. It's not about sitting on a higher pedestal or, oh, I have so much knowledge that I'm going to give it to you. It's just really about giving them a listening ear.
Hmm. And Ksenia is asking, what are the main motivations for a mentor to mentor someone? We, I think we touched on this topic a bit. So you said like it helps you personally, like you start seeing patterns, you become a better listener, and that it's also rewarding for you when somebody, like when you have this feeling of helping someone out. Is there something else that that is helpful?
No, I mean, personally, for me, it was, as I said earlier, for the first 10 years, I had no one to go to. I did not know what I was doing. So I came from a mining background. There were no engineers in, or, people in software in my family that I could talk to. And there was no culture of apprenticeship or, mentorship in the first few years of my career. And I struggled a lot. I didn't know, well, was Java the best thing for me, or whatever. And imposter syndrome, for example, I went through that for many years. So for personally, for me, the motivation came from that, from this fact that since I didn't have one, can I provide that space to other people around me? So maybe, so you need to find your own motivation, but these are some of the things that motivated me.
And you said that through this club, through this mentoring club, some people just want to have like a one-time conversation, but maybe sometimes I'm not sure if I got it right, but sometimes people need something more long-term, right? How often, like, what's the like, how often do you have somebody who wants to have something more long-term?
But long term is a little tricky, honestly, because first of all, so I have a few people who I'm mentoring long term. Some of these are people I was mentoring at ThoughtWorks when I was working there, and also through the mentoring club. I think one thing that you have to keep in mind is that long term is so you need to also be mindful of the time investment that the mentor is putting into this, right? And sometimes these relationships could also mean some kind of a monetary aspect to it. So there are mentors who do it more professionally. So one-time mentoring is fine, but if you're trying to build a more long-term relationship, then maybe there's like a fee that you need to pay to them or something like that. Um, but yeah, but other than that, it's just about establishing that kind of a contract between you and the mentor. And if they are interested and willing to provide that to you, then surely go for it. I would recommend to do long-term mentorship because it's difficult to understand the entire context and background in one conversation. And it's always useful to get to know each other a little bit more over time, and then you really get more productive with the mentoring process.
I guess it makes more sense to find somebody in your company, in your workplace, for this kind of relationships, right? For a long-term mentorship relationship, right? Or
Absolutely.
not necessarily.
If your organization has either a formal program or informally, somebody you can reach out to, I think that works out wonders. So yeah.
And Mariam is asking, how do you set boundaries for long-term mentorship relationships? Like, of course, uh, like you as a mentor, you also you have other things, right? You cannot spend all your time helping your mentees, and there are perhaps other things. So how do you set up? How do you set these boundaries?
Yeah, and that's where it gets tricky, as I said earlier, right? So, and sometimes it, it's more meaningful to have a paid relationship
Mhm.
in those aspects because, then both parties are more committed to it, and it's easier to create those boundaries and expectations versus just a regular long-term mentorship because then you don't know what to expect from each other. If that was the question around boundaries, if I understood that question correctly.
Yeah, I think this is how I understood it as well. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, thank you.
and sometimes it's also about like I have a couple of people I mentor long term, and it's also about telling them, look, it's not meaningful to have a next conversation unless there is a change in a situation, and it's not just about meeting every week and talking about things. If it's not, if beyond a point, it starts showing diminishing returns. So just setting those expectations also clearly often helps. And question, like as a mentor, sometimes if someone reaches out for regular mentorship, I say, do you really want to talk to me? Because is there anything different that we would talk about versus what we spoke about a month ago? And if the answer is no, then maybe there's no point in a discussion.
So basically, uh, being mindful, like from both sides, and asking, "Hey, do you really think we should have this? Will it be beneficial for you to have this extra session?" Right?
Mhm.
Okay. Um, yeah. So Ruslan is asking, what do you think about paid mentoring? I think you already covered that. Yeah. Is there any like is is it a beneficial relationship for mentee when mentoring is not on a free basis, but rather when it costs money?
I think absolutely. So it's it can be more constructive. It can be more, you can set the expectations better. Um, and it's kind of like paying for a gym membership in a way, right? So if it's working for you, then it's and I think what I've seen with paid kind of contracts is that there's there's more accountability. So if you're showing up, you know exactly what you're looking for. So there's more motivation from both sides to work on that relationship. Yeah, but
Interesting.
it's not very common from what I have seen, unless I think it's very common for like senior leaders like CXOs. But for when you're beginning your career, I've not seen a lot of these kind of paid mentorship programs being offered.
Maybe not in terms of career, but I saw a couple, like in terms of technologies, in terms of like how to find a job, these kind of things. Basically, helping prepare people for a job interview. So this is maybe more common for people with less experience.
Yeah, so it's like anything that you pay for, right? So it's like a training sometimes. So as long as you believe that you'll get something out of it, and you feel that it's priced rightly, then certainly it's worth considering.
Yes, Ruslan also is asking, what would you recommend for a mentee on how to build a two-way connection with a mentor? Um, not just question answering, but something more engaging.
So it's like any other relationship, right? So it takes time. So you need to start investing in that. uh, be authentic in what you're sharing. It's not a job interview, or it's not like putting only your best foot forward. It's really about discussing what are your challenge areas, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, and also and I think I've written a blog post about this as well. Kind of working with your mentor together over time. So even conducting a retrospective if needed after a while and saying, this is working, this is not working. Can you give me more? I don't know. Can you share some books with me that I can read, or whatever works for you, right? So making it work for yourself takes time and investment, and you should invest that.
Yeah, and we should share this blog in the comments after we finish.
Yeah, I'll probably share that with
Mhm.
you.
And quite a few people ask how to join this mentoring club, so we will definitely put links in Slack and also in the comments to the video
Yeah,
later.
joining as a mentor or a mentee. So if you want to just be a mentee, then what you need to do is go to the website and then search for a mentor and book some time with them. So each of us has a Calendly link, so you can just go there and see when we are free and book a slot. But if you want to join as a mentor, then I think the website has a page which has an enrollment form. I don't know the exact process right now, but you basically answer a few questions, and then Bastian and Jess, who lead this project, they'll review your application, and then they'll allow you in.
Yes, thank you. Um, and as somebody who has quite a lot of experience being a mentor, how do you usually like? Is there a difference between mentoring somebody who doesn't have a lot of experience, like a junior, and somebody who is more experienced? Is there any difference in mentoring these groups of people?
I no, I don't think so. I think it's just about what kind of challenges they're going through, and if you have something meaningful to add to that. To be honest, so I haven't really seen a lot of difference um, between mentoring a very junior person versus someone with more experience. It's just the problem space sometimes differs. So yeah, I don't think there's much of a
Mhm.
difference.
Yeah, maybe also seniors, maybe they have something more concrete, or it doesn't really happen. There is no
No,
difference.
it doesn't. And in a way, it's kind of an interesting lesson because no matter who you're talking to, in their problem space, they're as, they're struggling as much as the junior person in their problem space. The worlds might vary, but the extent or the nature of, of how they're dealing with it doesn't vary much.
And as a manager, do you think a manager should be a mentor, or yeah, maybe a mentor should be? It's better if like there is a special role of a mentor who is not a manager.
Yeah. So so most managers these days have like one-on-ones with their
Hmm.
teammates. In some sense, it's kind of like mentorship, but the relationship is much different because it's more delivery focused sometimes and so on. Of course, there's a career development aspect to it. But I would say as a mentee or as someone who's seeking a mentor, it's it's advisable to seek someone who's not your immediate manager because they can give you a much more unbiased opinion. They can tell you, quit this job, it's not working for you. A manager would probably never tell you that, right?
Yes.
That's the thing. So that's why it's useful. And also on that note, I think we keep talking about one mentor, but you don't have to have just one mentor. You can have multiple, depending on different areas, because not everyone would know. Like, if you're a woman or a non-binary person, it probably helps to also have someone from that same group because they would understand the challenges much better than maybe someone who's a man, or so I think it also depends on having different people for different aspects of your career that you're navigating through.
I think there is an article from Harvard Business Review. Like you don't need just one mentor. You need like a personal board of directors, something like this. Like basically, like you don't have to just talk to with the same person about all the problems. Like maybe
Absolutely.
it's a good idea to have 5 or 6 people who you reach out to, and of course, then like everyone will have their own opinion about the thing, and then you basically need to make this decision yourself at the end.
Yeah, and you said it well. That is the key, because a mentor is the real role of a mentor is to show you that direction, right? Not to take your decision. So you still need to and it's perfectly okay to disagree with your mentor as well, right? It's just about getting their opinion, but the decisions are still yours. So you still need to get invested more in that decision making process.
And we already talked about like for people who want to start being a mentor, you said if they want to do it through the mentoring club, there is a certain process and they should talk to the founding members, right? But in general, if somebody just wants to start being a mentor, whether with the mentoring club or some other platform or maybe just by themselves, what should they do? How can they start?
I mean, from a process perspective, it's just about reaching out to your network. Don't give unsolicited advice to people who don't need advice. I think that's one thing to be mindful of. So don't just go tapping everyone on the shoulder and say, "Hey, you should be doing things differently because I want to be a mentor." But having said that, I think just reach out and offer this as an option to people and say in your network and say, you know, um, I I'm here if you need to discuss something. That's how I started. Um, and yes, if you really want to do it more formally, then you can certainly join a club like Mentoring Club. There are many others, by the way. I think there's Plato and there's a few others. So that's one way to get into it. And in terms of just just acquiring the skills of preparing yourself. It's, as I said earlier, it's about having that empathy to help, not always giving advice but listening. People's environment or context may be very different from yours, so just being mindful of these aspects when you're talking to them.
And I know some people think of mentoring as a way to um, have, say, a side income, just start earning extra money by sharing the experience. What do you think about this? I don't know if it's like the real motivation. I'm not sure if it's money or desire to help. But in your opinion, when sometimes mentorship becomes more like a consultancy service, and I think Ruslan is also asking a similar question. Um, when you just go pay some money to get an answer, do you think it's a valuable thing for both parties?
Yeah, as I said earlier, I think so. I think if you have some value to add, right? There's nothing wrong in asking or charging money for that.
Mhm.
It's like how you would take give a training in I don't know, data science or data engineering. It's kind of similar to that. It also helps establish better expectations and boundaries around the contract. So there's nothing wrong with it, with pursuing that as a a side business, or even a career, because there are people who are pursuing this as a full-time career option as well, and there's nothing wrong with it if you can bring that value and people get benefited from that.
Okay. Yeah, I know some people started this as a side business, but then they got a lot of mentees that they eventually quit their job and started to focus on this thing, on mentoring. I'm also curious about. I'm just curious about your opinion when things like that happen. When somebody is a hands-on, let's say, developer, creating a lot of code, but then at some point they become a mentor. They start. It also happens in the workplace when people, how to put it, like when they get promotions and, like, let's say, from a senior to higher levels, they
Mhm.
start mentoring more, but
Mhm.
they start coding less.
Mhm.
And the fear that many people have is they become, how to say, less relevant. They start losing the skills. They get new skills, but they maybe become less hands-on. Is it something to be afraid of? Like, is it maybe just imposter syndrome again that kicks in, and it's fine? Or what do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, and I get this question a lot, especially when you're kind of growing outside that initial few years of individual contribution. Typically, the expectation is for you to get into more quote unquote people management, right? And mentoring could be part of that. Um, and my answer is, first of all, I think whether you're so you it's very rare for you to be doing individual contribution sitting in a corner for the rest of your life. So even if you're not formally accepting those roles, you're still just by the virtue of the experience that you acquired, you are helping other people out, and you are kind of doing people management, mentoring junior people and so on. So there's nothing wrong with that. And also, for some reason, there is this myth in our industry that you have to pick one over the other. So you can either become a people manager or a mentor, right? Or you can stay close to tech and programming and data science and data engineering. But if you look closely, and especially in the last few years, these two worlds are really converging together. There's a lot of people, and me included, for example. So I write code every day almost,
Hmm.
and at the same time, I'm leading a team, and I'm also, doing stakeholder management, and I'm also participating in architecture deep dives. And it's not that difficult for you to define how your own day should look like, and you can pick and choose your own percentage of programming time and versus people management time and so on. And in most companies, that's not very difficult to do. um, So I'd say it's definitely a myth that if I do this, then I'll not be able to do that. It's all in your hands how you strike that balance. And in most places, I mean, I have more experience working in corporates and organizations, but I'm sure even as freelancers or people running their own companies, it's kind of something that can be managed.
Yeah, so basically take control of your time, otherwise somebody else will do that, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's not that difficult to do, in my opinion.
So, is there anything simple you can suggest, like to do to start doing to like? I'm surprised that you said you still have like even though you're a manager and you're leading a couple of units, you still find time to program. So how do you do that? And is there any advice you can give for somebody else who also who's in a similar position and want to still keep coding?
There's no one answer to this, but I'd say start with accepting that you can manage your time better. It's not like you have to pick one path. There's no truth in that. So the day I committed to myself that I'm going to be, I have to figure some way out, but I'm going to be spending time working with my team. But I also want to write code. It all, I figured this out myself, right? And I think what happens is that a lot of us are not taking that first step of accepting that as a viable option. Once you do that, then you can figure this out by yourself. In my case, I over time, and yes, I mean it varies. So it's not like every day there's 20% coding time and there's 20% something else. It varies. But then over time, I also delegated more to my team, and that then makes it possible for me to take out some time to write some code if I want to, because my team can take care of certain things that I would have otherwise had to take care of, and so on and so forth, right? So I guess the short answer is you can figure that out. But step one is to say there is nothing wrong in me having this nice blend of
Mhm.
tech and management, and I'm going to make that work for myself.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So there is also a question from Sejal. How can one work out a personal development plan with your manager? And I think here we can also replace manager with a mentor. It doesn't have to be a manager. It doesn't always have to be uh, at work, right? You can also have a personal development plan outside of work. Do you have any recommendation how one can do that?
Um, Again, it depends on what objectives you have in mind, and I'm not very prescriptive about a format or this plan is better than the other. What I would say though, and where I have seen things fail, is it's very easy to create a plan, but it's very difficult to look at it every day, and that's where most of us fail. And what I would advise is, if you're working with your mentor or your manager, look at that plan together with them, every week in your one-on-one or once every month. Keep it printed and in front of you or wherever, right? That's when we lose sight, because we all create plans. The manager comes in someday, or you go to them and say, hey, let's create this nice plan. I'm going to do this and this and this. And then that gets forgotten after a week, right? And so the struggle or the hard work is in making sure that you're always looking at it, you're evolving it, and you're working on it. The format or what one plan is better than the other, I mean, those things, it all depends on your needs.
Which reminds me of this New Year resolution that we do every year at the beginning, and then that's the only time when we, at least me, look at this resolution, and then throughout the rest of the year, it's like it's just sitting there and collecting dust, and then at the end of the year when I create a new resolution, oh, funny, I wanted to do that thing.
Yeah, we're all, and they say that practice and process are more important than planning, and that's really true about your career as well.
Yeah, so I think we can take one last question, and the question is, what do you do when you are overwhelmed by something?
Uh, what do I do when I'm overwhelmed? Well, I want to say I take a break, you know, and not worry so much about, and cut down the less important stuff and so on. I don't do a great job at it, to be honest. I don't want to lie, But I think, yeah, I think it's about it's about I guess understanding that overwhelm is also a state of mind. It's a mental construct, and then trying to figure out what is it that overwhelms you. Because again, overwhelming the feeling of overwhelm is a very kind of high level general feeling, but you need to go deeper. Is it because of a fear of something that I'm feeling overwhelmed? That maybe, I don't know, I have a meeting with my CEO and I'm scared about that. Or is it that there's a lot of work that is overwhelming me, or there are decisions to be made? And then, going kind of one level down into that, and then trying to kind of split that apart into pieces. And that's how I usually try and navigate. I don't do a great job at it. I want to mention once again.
Yeah. And there is a question also, what are some examples of value you gained from being a mentor? You answered that already, but I can already see that like when you get a question like that, what do you do when you're overwhelmed? You sort of already have an answer to that. You because somebody previously asked you about this thing, right? And you've already probably went through this of like, okay, what should I do in this case? And when this question comes up again, you're not completely unprepared, right?
That is true. Yeah, I mean, it definitely compels you to think about how you've navigated these situations in the past, or how would you do them in the future. It definitely makes you more empathetic towards other folks. And are you still there? You frozen? Ah, you're back.
Yes.
I think
Sorry.
the other thing I quickly wanted to add is, this year has been rather difficult
Mhm.
for most of us, and so that's another kind of motivating factor to be able to connect with people from like different parts of the world. And I got calls from folks in Australia, in India, in many other places where someone lost their job, and they just wanted to talk to somebody, and that was personally very kind of nice to be able to talk to somebody and share their pain and be able to help.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you a lot, Rahul, for coming to us and sharing your experience of being a mentor with us. That was very valuable. Thanks a lot. And I hope you also liked it.
Thank you. I enjoyed it a lot. Thank you so much for
Yes.
inviting me.
And thanks everyone for attending and for your questions. And I will share the recording soon. And also, Rahul, if you can share the link to your to the blog post you mentioned, and also to the mentoring club as well.
Yeah, I'll
And
do that.
I will put this in Slack.
Absolutely. So, and I'm a member of the Slack group as well. So if you have any questions, any of the listeners, they can always reach out to me, and I'll be glad to help.
Thank you. Well, have a
Thank you.
nice day and have a nice weekend.
You
Goodbye.
too. Bye bye, everyone.